All right, we haven't done one of these videos in a couple of weeks, but we finally can put together the final picks video for the Xfinity series. So this is the Xfinity series at Dover, the racing on Saturday. Uh, Kev and I just went through the spreadsheet along with Rich and Coop as well to get our final interest levels, our thoughts in there, and we'll share this on Twitter. It's at Fast Cars FM. But wanted to put out this quick video kind of going over strategy, kind of, where our thoughts are and some of the different plays that we're going to be landing on for this weekend. So as always, any questions, drop them in the comments down below or hit us up on Twitter. So what's going on, Kev? What do you think about this slate, and what do you think about some of these drivers up in the 10K range up here?
Man, I'm excited we're here at Dover. This is one of my more favorite tracks. It always seems to be a pretty good race here, but I think this 10K range, 11K range, I guess, as well, is pretty stacked group, as it should be, being that the prices there. I think all these drivers are pretty good, with maybe the exception of Allmendinger, just because cars just haven't looked that good this week. But obviously we got Ty Gibbs up here. I think he's been really, really good this year. Very hard to argue with that, other than the fact that sometimes you just want to punch him in the face. But he's really good. Can't deny that. Always seems to dominate. I won't talk too much about these guys. Maybe I'll let you guys touch on those. I'm going to jump down here to kind of the bottom part of this range with John Hunter. He's been really good this week in practice qualifying. This car in general seems to run really well all the time, despite no matter who's in it. Somebody I'd look at, he starts ninth. So out of this whole group, he starts farthest back. So it offers the most PD. So I think he's definitely someone to look at this week. He offers kind of that combination. Could definitely run really, really well here this weekend. But guy I like the most out of this whole range, I'm probably not going to be alone in that. It's going to be Justin Allgaier. He's just an animal here. This is one of his best tracks. Continues to run here. We just look in the stats. He's like the last 4 or 5 races here. He's like second, first, seventh, and third or something, which is just an insane consistency there. Starts seventh, so offers you a little bit more than a lot of these other guys, especially all these other JRM cars. These in the junior motorsports cars, just in general, this week have been phenomenal. All of them are fast. All of them are good. You got Justin his best track, or arguably best track at least, and I think it's hard to not play him in cash at all. I think you have to play him in cash. You'd probably talk yourself into a fade in a GPP just because that ownership is probably going to be way up. And then I really like Josh Berry this week. Definitely wouldn't play him in cash, but he's a super high. He'd definitely be a good GPP play. If you're going to pivot off of Allgaier, probably drop to Berry. He's only ran one race here, but he was really, really good, really good in that race. I think he finished second or third. It's the highest rated driver at this track. Granted, he only has one race. Some of these other guys have multiple races. Allgaier's not far behind him, and he has way more runs here. But yeah, he just in general runs good at these high banked short tracks, and I think he'd just be a good pivot off of some of these other guys around him. Probably coming a little bit lower ownership. Kind of a weird spot being 10K, starting fourth, doesn't necessarily have that upside, but if he gets that good run this week, he could dominate this race and get him at lower ownership, and he could be there in between that takedown and not. I think it's a good pivot off some of these other guys.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, they all basically start, right next to each other. So, not all of these plays are going to work out. It's probably only going to be, a select few of them. But it's also interesting too that none of them start on the front row. The first front 2 cars are actually in the 9K range with Sam Mayer and Brandon Jones. So I think it's interesting. Like, if you're trying to chase an early lap leader, I think you should start with either Brandon Jones or Sam Mayer if you think they can lead you, the bulk of stage 1, or if especially if it goes green. If it doesn't go green and they re-rack the field, I think it really hurts the upside of Sam Mayer and Brandon Jones. I think Brandon Jones is going to carry a lot of ownership, starting on the pole. But if you look at like his practice speeds, and even as his car, longer in the run, like he still had a fast car. So I'm not too afraid of his car being really trimmed out. I would say I'm a little more afraid of Sam Mayer's car being a little trimmed out. We saw it fall off a little bit in the long run in practice, but I think Sam Mayer's going to hold significantly less ownership than Brandon Jones. So if you're looking for kind of like a contrarian GPP play, I know we're relatively low on him, but I think he could be a nice pivot off of Brandon Jones. But otherwise, I feel pretty confident in Brandon Jones being that early lap leader. And it's usually the only instance that we ever play Brandon Jones, either when A, he starts on the pole, or B, he offers you a lot of place differential upside and is usually priced kind of down in this range. But yeah, looking at this top range, I think, it's I highly doubt that Brandon Jones and or Sam Mayer are going to lead a bulk of laps. I don't see them leading any more outside of potentially stage one and maybe even part of stage one. So I think you need to jam in some of these more expensive plays, and they had really good speed too. I mean, Ty Gibbs looked like a really fast car. He's been fast all year long, so it's hard to argue him. I think Noah Gragson might carry actually lower ownership than he should. So I don't mind that is a nice, GPP play to pair. And don't get afraid of playing some of these drivers too, together, just because they all start relatively towards the front of the field. I mean, this is a track where you want to roster drivers who have the ability to get out front and lead laps, who have the ability to run fast laps. And just guys, who are going to be running up towards the front all day. So, I would lean more on the side of getting more of these type of plays in your field versus, more place differential plays, just because of the upside, the finishing potential, and the dominator upside that they carry. So you can kind of see where we're leaning, with all the drivers that are high. Obviously we're going to be playing more of those guys versus the guys that are medium or low owned. But yeah, a lot of really interesting plays in that top range. And then, real quickly at Hemrick and Austin Hill, I think, they don't have as much upside, obviously, as all the drivers ahead of them, just from like a dominator standpoint, but they do give you some place differential. So if you sacrifice a potential dominator and you nail the dominators that you are playing, you can then kind of chase some place differential plays. But me, I'd much rather have another play in my line that has more dominator upside, in hopes that, hey, if I played three of them, two of them are going to work out, then only playing two of them and only one of them works out, and then I can miss out on someone else because I was chasing place differential. But then we'll get down to, I guess, this 8K range. So what are your thoughts, Kev, when you get to Herps all the way down to Castle?
I think this is kind of like an interesting range here. I haven't really played around with making any lines yet, so I don't necessarily know where you are and aren't going to end up. But I mean, this range kind of offers a little bit of everything. You got Ryan Sieg here, broke something in practice when he was running really well in practice, but because of that, he did not qualify. So he starts DFL, which means he can't hurt you. It's a lot, so it offers a ton of PD, kind of a lot to pay for PD, but we've kind of seen him all year kind of be right around that top 15, top 10 car. Practice, he was running top 15, so I don't really see any reason why he wouldn't be another top 15 car this week. So I mean, for that much PD and top 15 finishing spot, like, it's gonna pay pretty good, points wise, but because of that, he's probably gonna be really high owned. But so in cash, he's probably a must. And GPP, I could still see a reason for playing him, but you might want to go another route, just depending on how your line works out, just to avoid some of that ownership. Castle, we have here, he's criminally priced. He's, again, really good equipment. Starts 18th, kind of same thing, seems to always be top 10, top 15 car. So however, just that PD should be pretty good, maybe coming a little lower on, just he's kind of at like a weird point per se. And then Riley Herbst is the one in this range that kind of intrigues me. We have him as low. I think that's probably warranted, just because he kind of seems to be very boomer bust, kind of seems to screw us over more than he doesn't. But he's been really fast in practice, really fast in qualifying. Obviously, he's qualified sixth. Probably going to come in really low on, just because he had a weird price point. It's kind of like probably a very boomer bust GPP play for you. Would not play him in cash whatsoever. But, he has that potential to kind of do something crazy and make that optimal lineup, get in on him on low ownership. But he could also absolutely bury you. So it's maybe if you're running a bunch of lines, get a little exposure on him, kind of curious on him. But yeah, I think he's kind of like the interesting one in this group. I'd like to hear your thoughts though, Andrew.
Yeah, I think Herbst is definitely more of a GPP play. I think most of the people in the 8K range are going to go to Sieg and Castle. And, I think for good reason. It's really easy to get both of those drivers and pair, two of the top, 10K range or even, dropping down and getting one of the front row drivers. And it still leaves you with, roughly, depending on what drivers you're picking, like roughly, $6,000, $6,400, left in salary, which you can still build, relatively a good line with. So it's just hard for me to pivot off of Sieg and Castle in this range to get to Burton or Creed or Herbst, but I think they're all going to carry lower ownership than they should, just because everyone's going to be jamming in. I think mainly Sieg. I don't think Castle's going to get as much ownership, obviously as Sieg will. It's just hard to ignore that upside. So if you're looking for some low owned, GPP darts with, you want to get aggressive and, boomer bust types of plays, I think Herbst is an interesting option. But if you're just building one line, I would not click on Riley Herbst's name right there. And then getting to the 7K range. So I kind of talked about this a little bit in the Xfinity series preview, but coming into the week, I didn't really think I was going to get to the 7K range, just with, chasing some of the potential dominators, and then maybe, filling out some place differential plays, and then, finding some value when you are chasing the dominators. It's hard to get to some of the plays on the middle of the slate. So I think all of them should carry relatively low ownership. I'd say the two I feel the strongest about would be Brandon Brown and Chandler Smith. Brown would probably be a little bit more of the safer cash play. It offers you a little bit more place differential. We know he can run, top 18. And Chandler Smith is interesting. He's, in the Sam Hunt Racing Toyota car, which isn't as good as the JGR Toyotas, but it's still relatively a good car. And, he showed good speed in practice and put down a relatively fast qualifying time. And if he can just stay kind of right around where he's at and, maybe fight for a top 10 or something, I think he's an interesting GPP play. My only fear with him, especially with the Sam Hunt Racing car, it's not always consistent. Usually it shows good speed throughout the race, but if you actually look at the results, sometimes the results aren't always there. So I'm not really too high about anyone in the 7K range, but if you do build your line and you find yourself getting to this range, I wouldn't mind plugging in either Brandon Brown or Chandler Smith. So not sure if you want to add anything else there, Kev, or if you just want to drop down to the 6K range.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed that. There's not too much excitement there in the 7K range, so we'll drop on down here. I think this is kind of an interesting range, and for being a 6K range, I don't really think it's that bad of a range. Everyone has their place here. I don't think there's anything too crazy here. I think Clements and Gralla are kind of our two guys we're on here. They seem to have the most upside. Again, you're not necessarily asking for anything crazy out of them. I mean, you're paying 6K ish for them, so you're not asking them to win this race. You just want them to have a solid finish this race clean, maybe get a top 20, top 18, maybe a top 15 if you're lucky. That's all you really ask out of here. I think Clements, probably top 18 car, nothing too crazy there. Offer some PD, not gonna do anything crazy for you probably, but probably relatively decent play there. And Gralla as well, kind of the same boat. Kind of interesting here. We're gonna see whether Buford was the issue in the car before or not, if it's just a team issue as a whole. So it's kind of say it's maybe a little bit riskier than Clements just because we're a little bit uncertainty there, but Gralla always does run a pretty sick paint scheme. So, I mean, you got the cool points factor there. It always adds a couple horsepower. So, see where that goes. Yaley, we're always kind of high on him. He's a really good driver, pretty good wheel man. Obviously, the equipment isn't the best, but he starts 31st, so it doesn't have all that much downside, a little bit. But, if he can wheel you to a top 25, he'll more than pay off this price range. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I like the 6K range a lot, especially when you compare, the 7K range to it. Mainly I like, Clements and Gralla of this range because I think both of them have, top 18 upside, maybe even a little bit more if things get crazy at the end, or if they're able to take advantage of a late race, restart or whatever it potentially might be. I think Parker Retzlaff's also interesting too. I don't know, what his ownership will be. He's still relatively inexperienced, but every time he's been in this car, he's been showing, pretty good speed and pretty good pace. So Um, he's another guy that's a little bit cheaper. If you couldn't get to Clements or Grella, I just feel a little bit more confident about them with the experience that they have. And then, the punt range, the value, the 5K range down here. So for me, I think, two drivers really stand out to me the most. And it's going to be both the Alpha Prime drivers, the driver of the 45 and the 44. So Ryan Ellis and, Raja Karuth there. So Ryan Ellis had a pretty good car in practice. Looked like it was going to lay down a relatively fast qualifying lap, but had a little bit of issues and, saved the car and, wasn't any worse than it was. But, because of that, kind of had to abandon the qualifying lap there. So really only got to lay one lap down. But we know, looking at the practice speeds and just the equipment alone, that the speed of this car is a lot better than what the starting grid position looks like. Like, for example, just look at his teammate. I mean, his teammate is starting 15th, so he would be definitely more of a GPP punt type of play if you're trying to be aggressive and really chase those kind of finishing points. I think Ryan Ellis will probably carry more ownership just because of the place differential upside that he has. But I really like Ellis and Caruth down here just because of their finishing potential. I think their finishing potential is so much higher than everyone else down here in this range. But if you don't want to get that aggressive, or if you can't afford, Ryan Ellis, if you have to go a little bit lower, then I wouldn't mind going to Stephen Parsons. He starts a little bit deeper in the field. If you look at his practice times, they were kind of top 25-ish, and that's kind of what you want out of punt plays. You really just want them to kind of finish top 25, especially for the ones that are starting, this deep in the field. So I'm going to try my hardest not to really go under, the Alpha Prime drivers, but if I have to, I haven't really built any lines yet. I'm probably going to go to Parsons as my main punt play down here.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed this. I think Ellis is definitely the best play in this. Chris kind of interesting just because he ran really, really well. It's not very often we see these pump plays run as well as he did. Kind of curious to see what happens to that. I mean, obviously his starting spot kind of limits your upside there and comes with a lot of risk, but it's also $5,500. So if you're getting wild with the GPP line, I mean, toss him in there. You never know what might happen. But other than that, I don't really got anything else other than if you want to see the spreadsheet, we'll post it over on our Twitter at Fast Cars FM. Like and subscribe to this video. We really appreciate all the support you guys have. And once we got some practice and qualifying in the Cup Series, we'll get a video for that, and we'll give you guys the full slate this weekend. Hopefully, we can win some money and get after it this weekend. Good luck, everybody.
Yeah, just like Kev said, and wanted to thank everybody too. We finally hit the 400 mark subscribers on YouTube, so thank you guys for getting us over that mark. And now we're already on up the next milestone. But we'll see you on the next one.